And welcome everybody to module 10 on the Stregoneria 101 rebooted course, I believe, yes. Tonight we will be talking about spirits, shadows, shades, and saints. And this will be, we're in the home stretch for the 101 course. So if you have been frustrated that you got started late, you didn't get a chance to catch up, trust me, look on the platform. I just shared a bunch of material with everybody, a bunch of dates and the schedule, and we built in some catch-up time for you. The exception being, if you're taking some of the other courses, you'll want to work around the other courses in the platform so that you don't fall behind with them. But hopefully everybody will be able to get caught up and up to speed, and we'll take any questions that anybody has. Let's see, screen share. Lost my screen share. There we go. And at any time, if you have a specific question about a specific module, just be sure to ask me in the platform underneath that particular module, because that increases our engagement. It makes it easier for me to look and see what it is you're talking about. And it helps other people that may come after you who might have had the same question. So it really works better that way. You could always ask general questions on our open topic nights, which will be starting up very soon. So again, like I said, tonight we're going to be talking about shades and shadows, spirits and saints. And our focus will be understanding how our tradition views the natural and supernatural worlds, learning what various types of spirits are in our tradition. This is something we've talked about earlier in both the advanced practice course and in the 101 course, and how we interact with them. So this is going to build on some of that material that we've gone over in the past. So again, just to review our worldview, the Italian and Afro-Sicilian traditions based on an animist philosophy. Our tradition fundamentally understands and operates from a belief that there is essential unity of all created and uncreated, manifest and unmanifest reality. Our ancestors believed that objects and places and creatures all possess a distinct spiritual essence. So some of you may have seen the interaction that took place mostly on Twitter this week, where somebody that I love and respect jumped on and attacked another practitioner friend of mine in a different animist tradition, saying that, if you eat meat, essentially virtue signaling that if you don't eat meat, you're somehow more spiritually pure because plants don't suffer. And, as may come as a surprise to some of you, I wasn't shy in jumping in and defending the perspective of my sibling on that discussion, and trying to help my other friend who was doing the attacking, to see that it was uncharacteristic for him. I've never seen this person be so arrogant and kind of myopic. It's not in his character. So something was going on. But I, tried to explain that, from our perspective, we not only, he said, well, there's no scientific evidence that plants are sentient. And this is from a guy who wrote a book on magic for the resistance. I don't know. Like, you write a book on magic and you're telling me that you're not going to accept anything that isn't science. There's a disconnect there. So our tradition believes that all objects, places, and creatures possess a spiritual essence, not because somebody told us, but because in our daily practice, we experience that. We know that plants are sentient because we cultivate relationships with them. And so there is no question about whether science catches up with us or not. Science only recently caught up with us on the idea that there's a mycelial network that is intelligent beneath the surface of the earth. So I'm not really, I love it when science catches up, because there are certain practices that we have that are a little bit out there. The mycelial connection was one of them, that I said I won't teach until science gets a little bit closer. And then they didn't just get closer, they kind of did a leapfrog and arrived at the same conclusions that our ancestors have known. But we understand that animals and plants and rocks and rivers, weather systems, and our very words, whether they're mindful or not, are animated and alive with the very same essence as source itself. And so on the night that we're doing this class, it is the 15th of August for those who are watching replay at some other time. And that is traditionally in the Catholic and Catholic conjure world, the Feast of the Assumption of Mary. It's when she assumes we would all be celebrating. No, it's not. It's one of those synchronizations when the Catholic empire co-opted the story of Isis and the story of Al-Uzza and the story of Oya and all of these bigger primordial mother stories. And it was the Catholic Church's way of giving the people that they were oppressing and taking over a chance to hold on to what they really knew without coming right out and saying it. So the divine feminine became embodied in this aspect of the glorious and blessed mother, but they didn't have to admit that she was the divine feminine part or of the you know, the polar companion to the divine masculine. And so it's interesting because the divine feminine in the Ifa tradition, in the Kemetic tradition in Egypt, in the Persian tradition, we find the divine feminine is the one who speaks more than any of the other deities, orishas, gods, goddesses, spirits, whatever you want. They are the embodiment of the wisdom that we all are the recipients of. So they take the wisdom that is they become like the wisdom incarnate that comes from the divine masculine source, and say, now I'm going to make it real for you, because an unexpressed wisdom is a secret, but a wisdom that becomes expressed becomes accessible. So many dimensions, one source, reliant on the first principle of Hermeticism, the principle of mentalism. We believe and we see that all of the manifest and unmanifest world is made up of a spiritually intelligent, vast and unquantifiable energy. Now, Einstein referred to this in, I think, 1913 as the 0 point or quantum energy. New Thought philosophers call this thought or creative intelligence, and metaphysicians, including Stregoneria, call it magic. Now, if we understand essential unity as the foundational principle of the cosmos, then everything manifest in the cosmos can be seen as an expression of that creative intelligence. This goes hand in hand with the belief that many particle physicists and quantum physicists are beginning to embrace and explore, that this experience of life may be holographic. Because it is intelligence itself figuring itself out, running all the different programs that make up the multiverse to better understand itself. And just as a single artist can create many different paintings and sculptures and pieces of music or prose, universal mind expresses itself the same way in all things. So getting to the topic of tonight, within our cosmology, each of the 4 directions are governed by a family of spirits. We refer to this to all of them put together as Lhasa or Lasse. And Lhasa is the singular, Lasse is the plural. So in the north, that is the domain of the Pala, and the earth element is governed by the north. So within that particular family of spirits, the most popular ones, and there are, depending on the region you go to in Italy, you may find some additional spirits. That doesn't mean that they're wrong, that I don't include them here. It just means I strictly focus on what I know from tradition. So this is the Southern Italian and Afro-Sicilian tradition. Some of the other regions, like for example, in the Lombardy region, there is some influence of French and Celtic magic that weaves its way in. So some of the folklore may change, but they're all part of the same family of spirits. So among the Pala spirits, we have the Monachetti, which are the gnomes, the Fauni, which are the animal spirits, the plant spirits, which are Flore and Silvani. And if you just think of those alone, plant spirits, Flore, which the singular of which is Flora, and plant spirits is Fauni, the singular of which is Fauno. So when we say flora and fauna in English, we're talking about plants and animals. Those are the spirits that are earth spirits. It makes sense that they would be earth spirits because these animals are largely on the earth. And includes, when I say animal spirits, I'm talking about mostly land-bound spirits. Now, governed by the elements of fire, the south is the realm of the Settiani, and fire has the fewest number of spirits associated with it, and are the most primordial and primal. These would include daemons, from which we get the Catholic mythology of demons or angels, the genii, which are similar to the Persian jinn, dragons, salamanders, and the spirits of the sun and spirits of volcanoes. And so when we look at the microcosm of our tradition, the Settiani include all of these things, but we look at the bigger picture as mythos expands over the planet. This would include the volcano spirits that you find in the islands in Oceania, that you find in the Pacific Rim. In Hieronymus's drawing, the 16th century, which you see on the screen in front of you, the yin and yang, animus and anima, depiction of light and shadow, forms the same element. So in that picture there, you actually see the Italian version of the yin and yang, which has both the angel and the serpent in it that we find in the Catholic mythos, and in some of the other traditions in Persia. Now, the Baladie spirits are ruled by the element of air. They're some of my favorite, actually, to work with. They're associated with the East, and they include the Linketti, which are the dream weaver elves, the Folletti, which are the spirits of the wind. Whenever I say Folletti, I always encourage people to think about that infamous picture of Marilyn Monroe standing over the subway grate and her dress coming up. We would say without equivocation that the Folletti were having fun with her when they were about to take that picture. And they're the ones that blow up a woman's skirt when she's walking down the street particularly when she's a prudish woman and she's getting ready to walk into church and her skirt flies up because of wind. The Folletti are having fun. Then there are the Fata, which are the Fae, and that includes house imps and a particular mischievous house imp that we believe that you remember from the story of when we talked about Bellembriana. We talked also about the house imp that was the mad monk, the Monacello, and which is often represented in our homes with a statue of Saint Francis. And the Monacello is a lot of the older people in our tradition would just say that's a mischievous kind of broody imp, similar to if we think in terms of Harry Potter, or we think in terms of the Lord of the Rings. In reality, when you actually embrace and say hello to the Monacello when you come home, it's just think more of like that your house also has a goth family member, and that's the Monticello, because he's just as goth as, as goth AF, as the kids would say. And but is actually, I couldn't imagine my home without him. We're going to talk about these spirits a little bit further in just a minute. It's said that these spirits of the air, though, carry out the works initiated by the impulse energy of the most powerful Setiani, including the demonic entities. So there is a synergy that happens between the different elements that if you think about our classes in the advanced practice course, and we started to say you can use this element and that element together to create this. Likewise, our cultivation of relationships with these different spirits allows us to be more effective in our magical practice. So if you're working with fire spirits, the Setiani, you're going to want to employ the help and the boost of the Bellarie in order to be really effective with your outcome. Now, some people have asked, so does the Bellarie spirits particularly, are they, your house spirits, the Lare, are they, do they come with your house, or do they come from someplace else and then come to your house, or did somebody else leave them behind? And the answer is yes to all of them. So there may be some house spirits that were left from the previous residents. There are house spirits that get attached to you from generation to generation. There are house spirits in my house that came to me from my grandmother's house. None that came to me from my aunts who were more formative in my training. But some of those actual house spirits reside and stay to this day around those two aunts' graves. When I go there, it's like a homecoming, because there are certain spirits that will attend to their grave forever, because they were, they didn't have spouses. They were left, when they died, it was up to the rest of us to go and take care of them. We were all over the world at that time. And so these spirits are permanently attached now at the cemetery. And every time I go, I invite them home. And then there are also spirits that are spirits of the place, that are spirits that have nothing to do with your physical structure, but they're spirits of that particular land and all of those elements that make up that land, and they may inhabit your house. So you learn, you get to know who they are by creating space in your life, in your heart, in your awareness for them. And that's why we greet our house when we come home and all of the spirits in the house. And that's why when I go to sleep, I tell all the spirits good night. As a result, I can't tell you the last time I had a bad dream, because the Linketti are dreamweaver elves, and they'll fuck with you. I mean, they will cause some seriously fucked up dreams. Now, I've had those, but I've not had a bad dream. Like when I've had like a dream that goes off the rails, there's always a message there. And there's always something like within an hour or 2 hours after I wake up, I get it. Like something where I'm like, oh, that's what that was about last night, because something presents itself in waking life. But I don't have like night terrors or those kinds of dreams. And I truly believe, in my personal experience, that because I have this relationship with these spirits, that for those who don't know, I have seizure disorder. I've been having for the last 6 months some breakthrough seizures, and I absolutely am convinced that the house spirits keep me from being really seriously harmed. I've fallen, I've hit my head. Some of the circumstances around the falls, I should have hurt myself much worse. And it could have been really bad situations. I've fallen and had a seizure, and when I woke up, there was a blanket under my head and nobody else home. And I don't leave blankets laying on the floor because I'm way too anal for that. But I swear to you, I woke up and there was a blanket under my head. Now, did I maybe yank it off of the bed as I was falling? Maybe. but maybe it was also the fact that the house spirits are there to guide me or encourage me or nudge me to grab whatever it was to keep me from slamming my head on a wood floor. So again, cultivate these relationships. Now, ruling the elements of water and presiding over the west are the Mani. This includes the water nymphs, which are mermaid-like creatures, but also much more than mermaid-like creatures, and includes some of the most primordial of the mothers. So this is where we get Yamaya, who was syncretized as Stella Maris, the star of the sea. It includes ocean spirits, river spirits. So again, if we think back to our more ancient ancestors, this is where Oshun arises out of this group. These are her children, these Mani spirits. And the spirits of waterfalls and streams and ponds. And so really very, very important, not only for their impact on life itself, but also for the gifts that they give us in terms of being able to do divination with water, being able to do cleansing with water, being able to do healing with water. And so again, without cultivating these relationships, you're pigeonholing yourself into a much more limited scope of the kind of magic you can do. This is one of those things that really sets us apart from pop culture practitioners, because our whole practice is centered around cultivating relationships with spirits and ancestors. We're able to get more predictable results. It's not that our spells are better, and it's not that we're better. It's that we just have a lot more help. So if you're building a house, you may know how to build a house. You may have all the tools, and you may be a skilled carpenter, but or let's say you're raising a barn. You may know what you need to do. You may have it all in your head, and you may be able to do the entire project by yourself. But you're going to get that barn up faster, more stable, and with a lot less headaches if you bring a group of people together who also know what to do, and you raise that barn together. It's the same thing in your magical practice. Now, talking again specifically about the genius loci, the spirits of place, and your particular house spirits. We believe that there are spirits of place, genie locorum in the plural, which protect a place, including our homes. But there is a spirit of place at every crossroads. There is a spirit of place, a genius loci in your town or your neighborhood, or your commonwealth or state, in your country. They're like concentric circles. Within your house itself, as you bring the concentric circles smaller and smaller and smaller, we refer to those, as I said, as the Lare, and that includes Bella and Brianna, the Monticello, and everybody has a tradition that's a little bit different from home to home, even within our region. But there is an intention set when you recognize that these spirits are there to make offerings to them every day. It may be that, and depending on your home, if you have like a lot of people who have cats, their offerings are going to always be things that if the cat gets to that place, because there isn't a place on the planet, except maybe suspended in air, that cats don't get to. So you have to make sure that your offerings, maybe your region gives offerings of milk. Well, milk's not healthy for a cat, so you don't leave an offering of milk. You could leave an offering of an orange. Same thing with flowers. If you have particular pets that are parts of your family, part of your home, you don't have to don't let anybody pigeonhole you into saying this is the offerings we make to your house spirits. You make offerings to your house spirits that would be healthy for anyone in your family, and that includes our four-legged and furry and feathered family members as well. And so it may be on your fireplace that you that you set up the house, Laurie. Now, I have one that we haven't put up here in the house that looks very much like a more rustic version that I've had since I was, I think, 15 or 16. I'll have to show you guys sometime, but it looks very much like the one in the picture. But I actually set mine up. There are two shrines in the house. One is on the shelves next to me, and the other is in the living room on a shelf. And that's just because some of our friends, when they come over with their dogs, and I don't want to take a chance of the dog knocking everything over. And I have statues like you see in the picture, and I'll make a water offering in the morning. I put a little shot glass of coffee there as well, and I always offer citrus fruit. Again, that small shrine should be something that's reflective of you and your relationship with those latte. In the beginning, you're not going to have a big relationship with them. So just do an offering of water and maybe some sweets, maybe some candy or a couple cookies. It's just important to know that this isn't like the Vedic or the Hindu tradition of making an offering, and then after it's sat there for a while, then you have a little nosh, you have a little prasadam with the candy and the cookies. With this particular type of offering, you offer it, and then when it's sat there for the day, in the morning, take it outside and offer it to the spirits of the land and to the animals, the squirrels and the birds and everything else. That way, it's an offering. It's not you're not Indian giving. I know that was horribly racist. I'm so sorry. I'm going to blame that on my grandmother. Because that was, I just heard her in my head, and oh, that was so skeevy. Sorry. But you're not saying, here's an offering, but I'm going to eat it later. You give an offering that you would enjoy, but you give it, and you give it unconditionally, and when you're done, share it with the animals or share it with the earth. So I wanted to talk a little bit about plant spirits too. So we encounter the Lhasa, the nature spirits, most often in the like North American and European cultures and South American cultures in plants. And each plant species has a main plant spirit. So there's the spirit of Datura, and then there's the spirit of your Datura. So you cultivate a relationship with Datura itself, like I like to say, capital D Datura and small d Datura. And that's why a lot of people will actually name their plants, so that they don't feel like it's small d Datura. Why don't I get a capital letter for my name? They name their plants. I don't. I still call them Datura because that's who they are. But I recognize that there's the big overarching spirit of Datura that I can call out to even when my Datura is not growing. And for whatever reason, I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, my Datura did not start to grow until my mom passed this year. Normally, I would have Datura out the ass everywhere you looked in my yard, and this year it didn't sprout until I planted it early in the spring, but it didn't sprout until the night after the following night from my mom's dying. And now it's, taking over the vines are crawling up and down the fence and everything. So that's a response of the big D Datura that I was calling out to through all of this, in all of my baneful work and all of my death preparation work with my parents, to be there and to protect them and to keep certain things away. Datura didn't have to be physically on the land to sit with me. But it was as though she said on the night after my mom was gone, okay, we've done the work, and now I just want to let you know I'm taking a break, but my children are here. So now I have the Datura plants, and I go out and I hang out with them every day. And they still haven't flowered yet. But I talk to them, and when I found out that I'm grounded and won't be able to go to my mom's and dad's committal to the columbarium, I said to, because I was saying, oh, you know what, these son of a bitches are going to grow, and they're going to they're going to flower when I'm in Florida. You watch. And because that'll be right about the time that the weather's perfect for that. And I went out right after I found out I was grounded and said, now I get to enjoy you every night for those 2 months that you'll flower. And so another important aspect of those spirits that we work with are the ancestors. In our tradition, we work more closely with the ancestors than we do any other spirit, spiritual force, or any other entity. Ancestors take several forms. There's blood ancestors, ancestors of tribe, ancestors of place, and the primordial ancestors of ancient realms. And so in that, for those who feel a connection to their older ancestors, and I recognize, and I don't want anyone to feel bad if they don't feel this, but being Sicilian, we recognize that my people are Afro-Sicilian. With there's direct connections, family members within a generation in North Africa and Tunisia, and other areas of Northern Africa. So for me, it's not a long stretch to feel like my most primordial ancestors are the Orishas. If that doesn't resonate for you, that there is no judgment on you whatsoever. It may be that you, if you continue to do the work, continue to work with your ancestors, maybe the Celtic line in your bloodline is stronger, and you find some of these primordial Celtics. I'll give you a little wink, wink, nod, nod, and say that all of them eventually end up back at the Orishas, but don't worry about that for now. Like, don't you don't have to, like, there's my grandmother's cousin was really big on Tana and Tanus, which is Diana and Dianus, or Diana and Lucifer. And in their minds, the husband and wife both, Tana and Tanus were Italian. That was the end of story. They were, even though they were Sicilian, they grew up in northern Italy, in Tuscany. And they said, no, Tana and Tanus are Etruscan. And I was in college at the time and said, you do know that before the Etruscans got Tana and Tanus, her name was Tanit, and she was from Tunisia. And I can make a direct line from her to the Yoruba ancestors. Nope. That we don't have a connection to them. You'll find that some of your ancestors really want you to focus on some of the closest of those primordial ancestors that they connected with. Don't let your knowing better kind of become arrogance, because there may be a reason that they want you to connect with those people. So if there's a Celtic connection, or a Basque connection, a Norman connection, or a Greek connection, follow it, see where it takes you. For some people who had no idea, they may feel particularly drawn to an Indigenous American spiritual ancestor. And I've seen time and time again these people who say, no, there's absolutely no Native American in my family. It's not possible. I know my parents, my family came here on the Mayflower, blah, blah, blah. And then they find out, well, that was actually not true. Some of their ancestors may have come over with colonialists, but some of their other ancestors were indigenous people, and there was healing work to be done with those particular ancestors for obvious reasons, that we can't let ourselves just say, no, ancestry.com said I'm this, this, and this. It's not an exact science. It's proven wrong all the time. Listen to your ancestors, cultivate those relationships with your ancestors. My friend Elias was talking this afternoon and said, it doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. It doesn't matter what stuff you have or don't have that you saw on social media that you have to venerate your ancestors. You can have a candle and a bowl of water. And if you can't afford, he didn't say this, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent there. If you can't afford a pillar candle for $1 at Dollar Tree, then get a tea light or get a birthday candle. It doesn't have to be elaborate and fancy. It's just carving out that space and time and moving into that other dimension to allow the ancestors to come through. They will love and appreciate as long as you're doing your best. Now, if you can afford the candle and you don't get it because you're tight, then be prepared for what comes with that. That's the F around and find out part. But you do what you can do. You don't put yourself in a position that you're not going to eat tomorrow, or you're not going to feed your family or loved ones because so-and-so said you have to have a red candle and a black candle for this particular day. You got to have the green candle and the yellow candle on this particular day. It doesn't work that way. It works with doing the very best that you can. If you can't even do a table because you have crazy people in your house that won't let you, go outside and find a tree stump. There, I promise you, it's there. There's the perfect tree stump for you that's meant to be your altar. If your family are skashad and they won't let you have stuff inside, nature will take care of you. And that's why we cultivate the relationship with the spirits of the land and the spirits of the air, because when we can't get those other things, they get them for us. So similar to the ancestors, we relate to saints and the old ones, or the gods and goddesses and orishas, the same way that we relate to our ancestors. So essentially, any holy being, any venerated and ascended being, we look at the same way. And we do that for a number of reasons. We do that because of the people or the beings that they actually are. We do that for the archetypes that they represent for us. So there's a second layer of information there. And then there's a third layer, which is the evolution of the mythos, like we talked about tonight, being the Feast of the Assumption, but also being traditionally the feast of lighting all the candles to Isis in the temple. And if we continue to dig back and dig back and dig back, we find out that there are more and more connections that ultimately go back to the mother of all mysteries among the orishas. And there's, when we get to the discussion part, if that's something that Dominic wants to explain for those that are following folk Catholicism and tying the connections here, he may want to share the story of the mother of all mysteries being the inspiration behind Orunmila, and how that connects, because that's another one of our ancestors. So one way to relate to the pantheon of gods and goddesses, the demigods and such, is to understand them, like I said, as archetypes. You may be somebody who just doesn't do personal gods. So look at what they represent. Pure and symbolic expressions of your highest aspirational qualities. Another way that you may relate to them is the way our blood ancestors would have, and that varies from family to family. And that's to see them, in my case, my blood ancestors believed every deity and every saint were the oldest of our ancestors. My grandmother would call them the old ones. That was a little bit of a cross of the Sicilian and the Romany, the what we call the Cingari, the Roma tradition. And then understand that these are spiritual beings who exist wholly in various realms outside of time and space, in different worlds, different planes of existence that coexist and interact with our own plane of existence. And so that challenges us to kind of move beyond our arrogance a little bit and think of a different layer than maybe the superficial layer that we were raised with. So like any other ancestor, saints are similarly spirits that no longer exist in the physical realm. They are distinguished by their connection to consciousness or source. It does, just because they no longer exist in the physical realm in a physical body doesn't mean they aren't in the physical realm interacting with you, that they don't manifest themselves here and now in your realm. They can, there are stories of saints who bilocate, and stories of saints who appear to people, and old ones and deities who do that because they move to that space where your ancestors are. And if you sit with your ancestors, you're sitting with your ancestors. They're right there with you. So too are the saints. It just may not be where they live. Somebody can come over your house and have a cup of coffee or have a pizza, and they're physically in your house, but they don't live there. So think of that the same way. The saints may not live at your house, but that doesn't mean they don't come there to visit you and work with you and support you. And often the saints that resonate with us, their lives represent aspirational qualities, just like the deities and the orishas that we hope to attain ourselves. And when we cultivate relationships with them, they become powerful allies in our magical working. Among the most powerful allies, second, I would say, only to plants. So synchronization, as we've covered in many different modules, at various times in our history, saints were also used as stand-ins for the older ancestors, the older deities, to avoid persecution by colonialism and the Roman Church. Many people imagine that this meant that our ancestors pretended to work with the saint and really worked with the deities that they represent. And for some, that might actually be true. In my grandmother's case, my paternal grandmother, that was absolutely the case. She didn't work with she wasn't a Catholic conjure practitioner at all. She practiced the old ways. My aunt, who was she was the sister of my dad's father, worked with both the archetype, the saint that saint was a stand-in for, and the saint themselves. And she said, why would I turn my back on any one of those three when you could have all of them? So many people imagine that it has to be one way or the other. That's, again, going to be a matter of cultivating personal relationships. In some cases, it could have been true. In other cases, I've done interviews with people who said synchronization doesn't exist. And so they are absolutely convinced that Choxy Roxy is Choxy Roxy and has no connection to anyone else. Isis is Isis, has no connection to anyone else. Stella Maris is Stella Maris. And for them, that's true because that's how they encounter those beings. And we don't know why. So we can't even pretend to know why. I don't want to know why. I don't have a need to know why. I just have a need to know how I relate to these people and these beings. So in the postmodern world, you can understand a symbiotic relationship that exists between source and its many expressions. Again, the reason this isn't weird for me is because I really do embrace essential unity. And so if essential unity is the fundamental truth that underlies everything else, then both people can be right. My friend in the Canary Islands, who argues that there's no such thing as synchronization, that's a white concept, then Gaten Gesundheit hate. She's right for her. She's not right for me. She's not right for a lot of the people I know, but she's right for her because at the end of the day, it's still essential unity. And if that's how she gets there, then who am I to say, no, don't do that? If you feel that your relationship with, you have a relationship with the Divine Mother Miriam, but you don't with Yamaya, or you have a relationship with Yamaya and you don't have it with Isis, then go with where your heart's leading you and then see where it takes you. The only thing I would say is, as you're exploring these concepts, don't close your heart or your mind to what might come next. Don't say, that's it. I only like the Blessed Mother. Anybody else, that's devil worship. Like, let go of that shit. See where the Blessed Mother leads you. And it may be nowhere else but the Blessed Mother. But you might be surprised because it might be some other wonderful experiences. So I talk about the secret distinction a lot when I do workshops. Sometimes a statue or a painting or other artistic representation of a saint or a god or a goddess is just that. It's a symbolic representation. Within our tradition, within the Afro-Italian tradition, and the Roma tradition and the Vedic traditions and many other traditions, we have rituals that invokes the living presence of a spiritual being into that statue or that painting or that object, which embody it, and it becomes that person or that being. Again, this is shared in the African tradition, the Hindu tradition, many other traditions, where you embody, you bring in the deity or the orisha or the being themselves to be in an object. And in a different class, I could talk about how There's actual magic that you can do to bring in other beings as well, for a time, to empower a particular tool or a particular object, for a particular working. So it's not that this is just so odd and it's only certain gods and goddesses. It's just how magic works. So in such cases, there are differences in how we work with a statue or representation. If it's just a photo, if it's just a picture, or just a statue, you would work with it differently, because it's just a representation for you to help you center or become mindful, than if that particular statue, one of which you'll see, I'm getting the 4-foot Lady of Fatima from my old parish that sat next to my mother's bed for the last 10 years, that I'll be bringing home when I get to Florida at some point. And that is an awakened statue. That when that statue is there, people who have never experienced that before freak out, because of the fact that that's clearly not a statue anymore. So working with spirits, again, no different than working with your spouse, your neighbors, your coworkers. There's no easy path. These are relationships. Every relationship is going to be different. No shortcuts. It's work. The old ones don't want to be worshipped, for the most part. There are a few who particularly do. I don't particularly work with those, but the majority of the ancient ancestors, the primordial ones, they don't want to be worshipped. They want to be loved. They want to be appreciated. They want your devotion. And there's a difference. The church creates worship. Religion creates worship. The heart creates devotion. They want to be your allies in your working. They want to be empowering you, not punishing you. Oh, you gave me a cup of coffee, and my offering's supposed to be rum, because you didn't have any rum, so I'm going to punish you. That it doesn't really work that way. If you gave me a cup of coffee instead of rum because you wanted the rum for Friday night, that's a different story. So these are relationships, and just like any person, if you went to their house and it was a Friday night and they just gave you like old iced tea, and they were sitting there with a rum and Coke, you would feel a little bit left out, like that, like everybody else was having cocktails and enjoying themselves, but all they offered you is iced tea or water, and if you drank. Remember that these relationships you're cultivating with spirits, house spirits, spirits of the land, ancestors, and great ones, the primordial ancestors, is the same way. Show the respect that you want them to show you. So the homework, and then we're going to take questions or comments that you might have. Spend the next week getting caught up on anything you've put off so far in the course. And there's a reason that I'm doing that now, because if you're going to start working with these ancestors, that's a process. If you're going to start working with the primordial ones, it's a process. But start doing it this week. And as you start doing it, work on getting caught up. And I want you to take notice if there's any connection between, okay, I'm finally going to sit with the ancestors every day. I'm finally going to sit with the saints and the great ones every day, and how much more progress you're going to make. Take time to review anything that might not have been clear. Write down underneath those modules any questions that you have, because we're getting ready now to jump into this course in the fall, based on the book, the grimoire, which is like jumping into adulthood. So the idea behind Stregoneria 101 was sharing with you what I learned through my childhood and teenage years and some of the realizations as a young adult. The grimoire is about jumping into that experience as an adult by looking back at 40 years of journals and saying, aha, the reason I became the person I am in this regard is because this was a family tradition. This was something I learned. This is why I do what I do. Everything you've learned up until this point has been the foundation of what we're going to cover. And it says the next 14 sessions of the grimoire course. It's actually, I think, 16 sessions. They added 2 chapters to my book, so I'm going to keep it. I'm going to follow the chapters. When you're caught up, consider doing another spiritual journey work session that we talked about recently, with the intention of visiting with your ancestors. Do it the same exact way that we did our journey work practice, but just say, I'm going to go to some place where I can sit with my ancestors. And if you're uncertain of how that goes, go with ancestors that you've met in this life. If you're feeling a little more confident, invite any of the ones in, but always make sure that you cleanse before and that you call on the ones that you know will have your back to have your back. And then there's nothing to worry about from there. So let me stop sharing and open the mic to anybody who wants to comment or ask a question or say that was the most boring. I literally am not fishing for compliments at all, but because of the seizure tonight, I have no idea how clear or not clear that was tonight. That probably wasn't the best night for me to have a seizure. Yeah, Dominic.
Okay, because you wanted me to talk about the
Yeah.
Mother of Mysteries. I will, but before I get into that, on this module, I don't remember, in the original 101 course, we talked about the syncretism between Valare.
Oh, you froze.
That's not my phone.
Okay, try now.
Okay, can you see me?
Now I can see you, and now we can hear you.
The camera is like acting up.
So we talked about the syncretism between the Lare and
Saints Cosmos and Damien, the twin saints.
They're messing with you tonight because you froze again.
Right, hold on.
Try this. If the connection's getting wonky, just turn off your camera and talk, and then we'll see if that gets better. Oh, we're not getting anything. Are you there?
You hear me?
Now I can.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Right. So my great grandmother, who my Pentecostal older brother said had the stuff that healed his leg when he was younger, in her house in Middle Village, Queens. Typical Italian, the plastic on her that you can't sit down. There was a statue, two statues of St. Cosmos and Damien, like really ornate, with the capes and, the regalia and everything. I don't know what happened to those statues. Maybe one of my dad's cousins has them, but I don't have the camera, but I'll post a picture of it later. My great aunt Lucy, my grandfather's sister, gave me a, it looks like a little book, like a little icon of metal of the two saints and the Our Father in Latin. And she said that was on her altar and she kept it in her purse. And she's like, you should have this. She told me when we went to like a memorial mass for her and my great grandfather. And then we went to the cemetery afterwards to visit them. And then after we left the cemetery is when my Aunt Lucy gave me the icons. So it's, it's interesting, the syncretization between the Lares and Cosmos and Damien, because they've always kind of been around my family for generations, and just seeing the statues and then, the relatives talking about them and everything. And they're not really popular here in the United States, I noticed, but they do dovetail into Voodoo and to Santeria. They represent the divine twins, the Ibeji, and some practitioners I know use them to represent the Dioscuri, the children of Jupiter, the children of Zeus. So they have, you know, many uses. Um, as far as the Mother of Mysteries, there is a video in my Afro-Latini class just on that. I think it's like the second or third where I go into more depth, but I could, you know, sum it up basically is the Mother of Mysteries is one of either 7 or 9, depending on the lore. Basically, within the Ifa, the Yoruba tradition, there's different classes of spirits in the spiritual realm. There's the Orishas, and the Orisha are specifically ancestral deities. So these are deities that have incarnated as humans and come back up, like Rabbi Yeshua, as some people believe, or Krishna, or, you know, different deities like that. So the Orishas are specific. There's like probably millions of deities, you know, among the Yoruba pantheon, but the Orishas are only 401, and they're specifically have lived as human beings. There's also our ancestors are there. There's other classes of spirits, but another category is the mothers, or the Iyami, or mothers. They're also known as the Aye, or like those who have sorceress powers. I don't want to say witchcraft, because a lot of people use that word on them, and then people from Africa like give you the side eye, like, you know, because when you call someone a witch, like in certain cultures, it's like it's not a good thing, you know. And just like you said, like our ancestors didn't call themselves that or have a label for things. So the Iyami are the 7 or 9 original primordial mothers who had descended separate from the Orishas. They had to make their own, you know, being divas. They had to have their own entrance. And at first, like Obatala, the Orisha Obatala, did not want them to go. He was like, ladies, you don't need to go down there. It's crazy down there. It's a Wild West show on the earth. And they're like, but we insist, we got to be there. So they came down and they said that they nested, because they come in the form of birds, in 7 different trees. Some people say that's the 7 continents, the different ethnicities of humanity. And also my friend who's a priest of Shango said that in Hinduism, they talk about the 7 yoginis that also descended to earth to teach humankind astrology and all the arts and things. So the Yami represent our first mothers that came from the spirit world to give birth to us and to make everything. And they're considered separate from the Orishas. They have their own mysteries that only women can be initiated into. Men are not allowed, for obvious reasons. And the female Orishas have relationships and alliances with them. Like Oshun used their power to mess up the male Orishas when they disrespect her. And, you know, I'll get into that when we talk about Oshun. But basically their relationship with Ifa, with Orumila, is that when I or another priestess or any diviner, every time we throw those shells, or the Babalaos use the palm nuts for their divination, those patterns, the source of those 256 patterns for divination is Iyami, is the mother. So even, you know, Ifa is, you know, supposed to be like a masculine, or, you know, so even though there are women diviners, the power and the source is feminine of all that. And so this has always been a special day for me, August 15th, the Assumption. And also it's also the Numeralia too. So you know, it's like basically that exaltation of the divine feminine in all the traditions.
Right. And that expression, thank you, because that I knew that you would do a much better job than I could ever do of expressing how the in the case of Oromia, the divination itself could be done by a man, but the expression, the words of wisdom would be nothing if they didn't come from the feminine, from the mother. So the mother expresses herself, and we get those gifts. And if you think of, again, cultivating those relationships with those ancient ones. If you look in many of our, realizing that not everybody had that kind of relationship with their mother, but even those who had broken relationships with their mother cultivated some skill from those broken relationships. There were things that we developed, strengths we developed, insights we developed, that even came from those who had the misfortune of less healthy relationships. So thank you for that. Somebody else want to comment or question?
I have a question. And I don't know, maybe Dominic or John Michael, I don't know who would be better to answer it. When we were talking about the ancestors, and you're saying that like the old ones go back to the I apologize if I mispronounce it, the Orishas.
Mm-hmm.
And Dominic, you're talking about the primordial mothers.
Mhm.
Is that a closed practice, or is that something that when I'm working with the ancestors, if they're open to me, that I can work with? Like, how do I approach that?
I'm going to let Dominic answer that, because my answer would not be a religious answer. So it's a different perspective. But when somebody says working with, that just understand there could be two means of working with. Working with could be having a spiritual ally. But if you're working with in the religious sense, then that's definitely where Dominic comes in to share why it's so important to not dive in without being initiated and all that. Dominic?
Okay.
Yeah, basically the answer is yes and no at the same time. Okay, so it is a closed practice in the sense that certain things like the divination and other rituals are closed to the public. However, at the same time, what is open is what is considered cultural practice. So I'll give you an example. Yamaya, who is one of the popular orishas, is the orisha of motherhood, of families, of the ocean, magic, and womanhood. And she governs those things, right? She's very popular, especially in places like Brazil. So in Brazil, they have a public festival for her. And you could see like the Catholic influence because Yamaya is syncretized with the Black Madonna, or with the Virgin Mary. And so on New Year's Eve in Brazil, New Year's Eve is considered sacred to Yamanja, or Yamaya. And for us in the religion, like, we'll have out the offerings for her, and, all those flowers, fish, all the stuff that she likes, perfume. She's a classy lady. And for the people that are not even in the religion, but because she's such a cultural influence in Brazil, they will do people do all the good luck stuff on New Year's. So in Brazil, it is believed that at the stroke of midnight, and Yamaya's number is 7 because of 7 seas, if you jump after you count 7 waves in the ocean, your wishes will be granted for the rest of the year. Now, that's not something that was part of the religion, but it's something that evolved out of cultural practice. So there are people that are not initiated in the religion, but do participate in the festivals and drummings that are open to the public. That's open. That part is open. Within the class, like, I try to show things that people that are not initiated can do to a certain extent, because a lot of things have become cultural at this point, because stuff about the Orishas is in music, it's in film, it's in books, it's in TV. Like, even like, I think someone brought it, Jim Michael may have brought it up before, Desi Arnaz of I Love Lucy sing Babalu. Babalu Aye is one of the Orishas. That's something that was on American television in the 1950s. So certain things can be enjoyed by the public, and then like the more serious practices are closed. But definitely from a it's just like kind of like being culturally Catholic or culturally Jewish in that sense, where we have feasts and procession for the saints and Madonnas. You don't have to be Catholic to like go to one of those things.
Okay.
And with initiation comes exposure to and greater understanding of the mysteries. So if it's
Yes.
something that calls to you, then it's something to explore. And what I think is really beautiful in so many of the African traditions, and the Afro-Caribbean and diasporic traditions, is that you're not going it alone. So there's somebody there that will be, your godmother, your godfather, somebody who's gonna say, I don't, this doesn't seem like it's for you. Like maybe I had a friend in the beginning of this course who wanted more than anything to be a practitioner of Ifa. and the Babalao said, this isn't your tradition. Your people are waiting for you. And we're common ancestors, but you need to start with the ancestors that are closest to you, or it's not going to make any sense to start with us. So it's nice to have somebody who's there to say, look, this isn't about just we're the First Christian Tabernacle of Swiss cheese on the corner, and they just want more people because that means more money in the basket. They really want what's best for you, and they're going to do divination and everything else to find out what's best for you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Cool.
Was there something you were going to add, Dominic?
No, I was glad, and thank you, Kelly, for bringing up that question, because it's something that comes up with a lot, and because of social media, like there's whole controversies about that discussion of what's open, what's closed, what can be respectfully accessed, and what's off limits and so forth. But even stuff like with the yummy with the mothers, like I don't even have access to some of that because I haven't received that yet. So, and that may be something that maybe in the future, but right now I don't think I can handle that.
Anybody else?
Hey, John Michael, it's Tara.
Hey.
I'll share a little bit. Hi, everyone. So there's two things I want to point out that I like that you shared in this tonight was the correlation with the elements because of how well that goes with the other class right now. So I really like how that just kind of like flowed in together. One thing that I really appreciate you pointing out is what to do about the food and the things that we leave out, because that's something that I get so caught up in because I feel like, oh my goodness, am I like wasting food or like, what am I like, there's just that chatter in the back of my head that does that. So saying to offer it up, to the earth and the animals afterwards, because then sometimes I'm like, well, how long should I leave this here? Or like, what do I do? So thank you for that. And the connection with the ancestors, of course, through all the courses that we've had, since I've been here, that's been something that's really elevated for me. And it's interesting because just tonight and really like in the past few days, I started to, get back on the whole ancestry thing and started to kind of dive in. Like my mom has done so much work on that side of the family, but I don't have as much on my father's side. On my father's side, as far as I know, is pretty much all Italian. And so just going through that and I'm such a visual person, being able to go through that, I feel like has allowed me to have this more connection because I've just kind of, it's like I'm connecting with everybody, and going through it and seeing all the names and the brothers and the sisters and the children and the this and the that. So it's really heightened something for me, and I might get a little emotional. I kind of feel it right now. I never got to meet two of my grandparents, my father's father and my mother's mother, and they both died fairly young. And it's always something that's felt like kind of a loss to me, of never having like, two grandparents that were together, or just feeling like there's this part of my parents even that I didn't get to know, these people that created them, and ultimately helped create me. And I just found today a picture of my grandfather. And I don't have anything, you know, from him. And I don't have any pictures of him, but I found his naturalization. And there was a picture, and it was just so beautiful to see his face, you know, because I never knew him, and I only saw one picture of him that my grandmother had, their wedding picture. And since she's passed away, like, I don't have that picture. I've still never, like, received a copy of it. So I don't, you know, and I have a space that I've created through time of, you know, dedicating to the ancestors. And there are just certain things and certain people that I feel like, and I know it can come from other ways and it can come from that spiritual way. And it doesn't have to be all about having a thing or like something of theirs, but like just being able to see this picture and his face and see even like myself in him. I didn't realize like how much I look kind of, you know, like him even. And just these little, you know, little things. And so, you know, tonight when I was cooking, I played, you know, that side of my family is from, and he was from Naples. So I played music from Naples, Italy tonight. And I have this big, you know, like writing board. And I wrote on the board, like, you know, you would in a cafe. I kind of have tried to make my kitchen look like an Italian cafe. And so I wrote on the little board, his name, his real, you know, Italian name. He changed it when he naturalized, you know, to be more American. And so I wrote his name and my grandmother's name, you know, with a heart, and just dedicated the night to them, and like cooking, and I danced. Um, and it was just so beautiful, you know, and just again, like I just felt even closer to him, being able to like see him in a sense, just in a picture, you know, look in his eyes and grasp that. And it was just so beautiful. And again, knowing we don't need to have those things, but it really, I'm gonna say, was like helpful, you know, because like you know, like I said, I don't have any pictures of him. So it brought up a lot of things for me too, um as far as the saints, because my grandmother was very, you know, into that. Like I said, I wasn't brought up religious, but my grandmother was. So when I'd spend the summers with her, you know, she was really into Saint Joseph and Saint Jude. And so, you know, it just allowed me to help and open up and honor those other aspects of myself. So thank you for letting me tear up a little bit. But
Well,
emotional today.
thank you for sharing that, and you know, it's awesome. And if there was one thing I could suggest, it's don't give up. Just don't give up, because I you know, spent my entire life doing ancestral work from the time I was 6, 7 years old. There was always a disconnect with my grandmother's father, and I've never in my life understood why. I used to try and figure out why, and I thought, you know, maybe he doesn't like queer kids, and maybe he doesn't this or doesn't that, or maybe he just doesn't like me, and never understood why. And I realized that when I was doing that particular work, I always tried out of respect to speak their language. And then I found out that my grandmother's father's family were Roma. And so I realized, oh, well, maybe they don't speak Italian. Maybe they speak, you know, what they would call Gypsy Sicilian, which isn't, I mean, Sicilian's not Italian, but even different when you mix a Roma language and Siculo. And then 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I was digging around to try and figure out why our family tree disappears at one point. And the story that was always passed down was, well, if you knew what they did, that's why like people don't talk about them. That's why there's no records, blah, blah, blah. But what the truth was that I found out that and like it was a really painful moment for me, because the night I found this out, there was nobody on the planet I wanted to call and tell this to more than my dad. I was furious because I couldn't pick up the phone and have a conversation with him. on the phone about it, because it would be one of those things we did that I would think this is going to help keep him from the dementia getting too bad, and I'd send pictures and realizing that, damn it, if this could have only happened a few months ago, this could have been another one of those things to help him. So I just sat with my dad, because what I found out, and all growing up, my dad made fun of me because I am an Anglophile. I love the Queen, even though I hate the patriarchy and I hate colonialism and everything they did. But there is just something about the monarchy itself that I just think deserves respect. And there's like nothing that they've done that really deserves respect in real life. So my dad always made fun. He's like, why you're the one that wants to burn the patriarchy, and yet you won't let anybody say anything bad about Elizabeth. Well, my father's mother's father was born in London and he didn't speak Italian because his parents wouldn't let him speak Italian. So he only spoke Sicilian and English. And so I could speak all day, all night long, sitting in front of an altar, trying to speak Italian to him. And it made as little sense to him as his wife's whole side of the family, because they spoke Italian and Sicilian. So he didn't understand Italian at all. And so my Sicilian has gotten worse and worse with cognitive issues progressing. So I just sat and for the first time last night connected with him. So don't give up. Like, I know that I'll have a picture or something of him now, because now I know who he is. He was like the big mystery that nobody, I knew his name, but I knew nothing else about him. And finding information about the Coppola family was next to impossible, because they were mafiosi, and there was that element. But it turned out that that my Anglophile connection that always frustrated me, because I detest what they stand for, was never about the Queen. It was about my ancestors saying, look at London. I went to school and I studied hair design in London, in Lamb's Conduit, East London. And I didn't know why, but my aunt said, you want to go to London? You want to study with Trevor Sorby? Let's go. She was my chaperone. We both studied. She was a hairdresser too. We both studied with Trevor Sorby, and she's like, "Is it out of your system now?" And I was like, "No, I don't ever want to leave here. Like, I want to stay here." And my grandfather lived in Lamb's Conduit, in the East End of London. So you never know what that thing is that's going to be calling or nudging you your whole life, that makes no sense, and that kind of makes you feel like a little bit of a weirdo. And then all of a sudden you find out, oh, it wasn't me. It was an ancestor reaching out to me and saying, hey, look at me right here. This is where you're going to find me. This is where you're going to connect with me. So you never know where you're going to find that, another picture of your grandfather.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope I do. My grandmother, I mean, I don't know why my grandmother never had any pictures. And I'd hear stories about my grandfather. I mean, he sounded like an amazing guy. He was like pals with all the kids in the neighborhood. They all loved him. He passed away like very young. And unfortunately, like I just never got to, see pictures or have anything. So, yeah, it was pretty magical. And then looking up again on Ancestry, just finding certain things out about like where he grew up and how close that was to where I hung out in Manhattan. I had no idea. Like, I didn't know where he lived. I didn't even realize he lived in Manhattan. So I knew they were in the Bronx, but with my dad, but when my dad was a baby, but I was like, wow, I used to hang out so close to like where he was. So, like you said, it's just interesting how all these other random things, and I'm interested of like what else is going to start to.
And the food connection, remember, we both have the connection through the same ashram. I will admit that it is hard for me to not think of offerings as prasad, and say, oh, I'm just going to have a little nibble. That cookie really looks good. And now it's blessed by the person that I gave it to. I really try to keep really clean lines in my in my cultural practices, and I'm not on the ashram anymore, so there is no prasad anymore. And that was the hardest thing. So I feel you. It is tough, but it's easier when you know that the offerings you give, like when we have a tradition, when we go and take plants, like along the riverside, there's tons of mullein that grows along the Susquehanna River. That's where I usually go and get get the mullein that I need. But our tradition is that you always leave something when you take something. And so I used to leave, like the tradition was you left pennies or something like that. Well, there are a lot of homeless people that walk along the riverfront here in Harrisburg. And there's wildlife that walks there. So now when I go to get mullein, I take a like a Chinese food container that I can put food in, like a sandwich and things like that, because then they're not groundhog with the thing that they do for the lottery in Pennsylvania, some kind of hedgehog or something, Punxsutawney something, groundhog, whatever sees its shadow, that they run along the riverfront too. So I bring citrus fruit for them, and I put them a little bit further away from the container that's sealed, and homeless people get it. And after a while, the homeless people were on to me that was my practice, and so they actually recycle and they leave the container there under the tree for me, because they know I'll come back and get the container and bring more sandwiches. So it's another way of making an offering that gives in a greater way, and then you don't feel like you're wasting food.
Thank you.
Anybody else? And you're welcome. Okay, guys, it is 9:32, almost within the confines of when we were supposed to be over. Thank you for being here tonight. Hopefully this made some sense. And if it doesn't, when I watch the video, I'll just redo it, because if it was as messy as it seemed like it was, I promise I'll redo it. But I think I got everything out there. Thank you, Dominic, too, for reminding me that it's also Nemeralia today. I actually intended to tie that into Tanit or Tana and Tanus. And then that train left the station as soon as I started to recognize that it pulled up. But if you have any other questions, go ahead and put them underneath the module, and I'll have it up in the back in the course itself within about an hour to an hour and a half. So love and appreciate y'all.